selected her the day after. And I remember sitting on the platform up front with Lou and Dan and Joe Seymour and some other people, and there were 800 people there. And this man got up and said, "My son died in the terrorist attack. It isn't good enough just to rebuild. You have to make something great that will be a memorial to what happened." And I leaned over to Dan and said, "This is the beginning of the change. We are going to have the support of the public. This is now open to the public." Right. Lou decided that this was a good thing and scheduled a second such session, which happened at the Javits Center. Right. That meeting is what turned everything around. And I remember being very upset. I mean, the Fireblinder and Bell schemes were out there. Everybody was dumping on them. I'm petrified sooner or later they're going to blame me for doing this. And there are 2,500 people at tables, and they all hate these schemes. Right. And they're all voting accordingly. Right. And I can see Lou is all upset, and Whitehead is upset, and Betts is upset, and each different, for different reasons, in different ways. And it was the moment that I understood everything had now reversed. It had stopped at the Pratt Center. It was reversed here. Right. And so these two sessions, I think, were very important. The answer. We didn't have any after that.
And in a way, they were vulnerable by having a process, if you want to call it that was so entirely political. Yeah. Once you actually had voters in the room looking at them and saying, "Yeah, this sucks," the politics of it flashed in front of them, yes, as opposed to any kind of actual planning integrity.
Oh, that's right.
Right.
But so far as I was concerned, if we had public participation, we were going to get the better schemes.
Right.
I never had any doubt about that. It's just the problem was getting it in front of the public.
So what, you sort of trusted that the public would sort of make a good call, or that the architects would kind of man up, and present a best foot thing if it was going to be that public?
I thought we wouldn't make mistakes. I didn't think that this would produce anything great, but it would get us something that was not just acceptable, but better than acceptable. Right. We would get something that made sense, and I saw the public as a partner in all of this. Very important. And I was right.
Yeah. Was Libeskind clear that this was kind of, I don't want to say non-binding, but the idea that was actually going to happen was...
He thought, I don't know what he will tell you today, but I think at the time he was sure that it was his design. And I was sure we hadn't picked his design. We had simply picked his plan. And the brilliance of his plan, basically it took the two things that I insisted on, and that is Granite Street going through north-south and Fulton Street going east-west. And I wanted to turn Fulton Street into a major artery and connect to the ferry and either river. Right. And Danielle figured out what to do to make it work. And that was to move the PATH terminal onto Fulton Street and to have a piazza in front of the railroad station. Mm-hmm. And his wedge of light was a piazza in front of the railroad station. And I kept telling him, stop talking about that, just explaining what you're doing.
Because a piazza in front of the train station sounds good enough.
And it made the thing really work. And he brought that and the slurry wall, which I'm not sure was necessary or not necessary, but he saw the symbolism of that as very important.
Right.
He thought he was going to get the design. I never thought he was going to get the design. I was sure David was going to build all these buildings, and turned out David built 2.
Right.
Number 7.
Right, and then enough iterations of the Freedom Tower as it went along with
Yes.
the police and blah, blah, blah. It was sort
Right.
of...
The police are the guilty parties in this. They are the ones that have, whatever's wrong on that site is a result of the police department.
Right. Do you think they waited intentionally until the last minute?
No, they always were going to control where the traffic went.
Right.
Let me tell you about number 7, because it's a wonderful story. This is in my second week on the job, and Paul Goldberger came to interview me. At the end of the meeting, I said, "I'm going uptown. Are you going uptown?" He said, "Yes." He's one of my students, and is a dear friend. And I said, "Well, let's share the subway." We get on the subway. He said, "Where are you going?" "I'm going to Larry Silverstein." He said, "Do you know him?" I said, "No, I've never met him." And
you said that.
I'm answering, I have never met him.
Right, which seems odd because...
Well, he was in the real estate business.
Right.
I was in the real estate business. I didn't know him. I didn't know Donald Trump either.
Right, but I would have thought at some point early on in this whole LMDC...
This is early on. This is the second week.
Okay, right.
So, Paul turns to me and said, "Why are you going to see him?" And without batting an eyelash, he say, "I'm going to get Greenwich Street back." Today I understand what chutzpah that was. At the time, this was the right thing to do. I was going to get it. So I go to this meeting, and the meeting is Larry Silverstein, his deputy, and David Childs. And I know David well.
Right.
And they show me a plan for number 7, in which there's a hole on one side to let traffic through on Greenwich Street, but it overhangs on Greenwich Street. And I look at this thing, and I say, "That's not acceptable." As if I have the authority to say anything. And David had figured out the current plan. So he pulls this out and he shows me this plan. And I said, "That's perfect. We can't do it. It's not possible." I said, "Well, why not?" I said, "Because we have to give back the triangle that's now on Greenwich Street.
Right.
We can't build there, and we need to replace the bulk, and we need 23 feet of Vesey Street." And I said, "Well, let's get 23 feet of Vesey Street." And they say to me, "Well, it's owned by the city of New York. The city will never transfer the property to the Port Authority." I had been on the Planning Commission when Giuliani was at war with the Port Authority over renewing the lease on the airports.
Right.
I knew very well this was not doable without something extra special. And I said, "Well, have you discussed this with people?" We're having a meeting with the Verizon people, and the city, and I said, "Have you invited the deputy mayor?" They say no. I said, "Will please invite the deputy mayor to this meeting." And I called the Council of the Planning Commission. I swore him to secrecy, and I said to him, "I need to figure out how to transfer 23 feet of Vesey Street from the city of New York to the Port Authority without going through ULURP. If we go through ULURP, we never come out."
Right.
And he points out to me that the Port Authority can take any property, doesn't need any approval of any jurisdiction in either New Jersey or New York State. But as a matter of political reality, in order to do that, you need the assent of the local government.
Right.
I pick up the phone and I call Dan and I say, "Dan, you're going to be invited to this meeting. You will please designate